Hi, in this final video, I'm going to show you how to work with elevation raster data and symbolize that. So I've added a digital surface model to QGIS for the Trelleborg area. So I'm going to right click on this and zoom to layer, and we will see this here. And I'm going to turn off labels for Comuna, or maybe I'll simply move that label out of the way. So we have this digital surface model. So this is an elevation data set that includes the built infrastructure, including buildings and fence lines and things like that with it. And so in QGIS we have several ways to render elevation data sets, and some specific to elevation, like this one called Hillshade. This will create a rendering of the terrain from the digital elevation model. So I'm going to choose elevation, and we see the terrain for this part of Denmark. So this is one of the famous Viking ring fortresses shown here that we can see. And we can see rows of trees and buildings in this data. If I zoom in, so it's quite nice. And what we're going to do now is duplicate this layer. And underneath, we're going to right click and rename this. Instead of copy, I'm going to call this colored DEM. And so this layer, I'm going to, instead of Hillshade, I'm going to choose the single band pseudo color renderer. And let me turn off the one above. So this allows me to represent elevation in colors other than black to white. And there are specific color ramps with earth tones for elevation data. And what I'm going to do is, instead of using this red, yellow, blue color ramp, I'm going to click the drop down and I'm going to choose Create New Color Ramp. From here I have a choice of different kinds of color ramps to create. Gradient is one where you can choose a beginning and a starting color and have QGIS create that. But I'm going to choose this one called Catalog CPT City. This is a set of color ramps that come with QGIS, but they're kind of hidden in this little dialog. So this is opening up, and it's going to basically present me with a whole series of color ramps organized by type. Here's the window. And we can see that this is all the ramps. There's some for bathymetry, which is the depths of the sea, blues, diverging, grays, greens, so all these different color ramps, and there's this category for topography. And we can choose one of these and pull it into QGIS. I tend to like the CDA and SDA quite a bit. So let's try CDA and click OK. And it doesn't look so great here. Let me go back in and try another one. Let's try SDA. Click OK. Okay, so now we have our elevation colored, and we can see the range of values here. And I'm going to turn the hillshade back on, and I'm going to now employ something called a blending mode, which is a way of multiplying or blending one layer with a layer beneath it. So I'm going to apply a blending mode to this hillshade version of the layer. So here's the hillshade version, and going to where it says blending mode, click the drop down and choose the blending mode of multiply. And this will multiply this hillshade with the colored DEM beneath it. And so now I have a color hillshade, and it starts looking really nice. We can see the river winding past the fortress here, and the visitor center, and the ring fortress. And I very quickly get a very nice rendering of this data. And I can do one more trick with this. I'm going to right click on the color DEM and duplicate this one more time. I'm going to move this copy of the layer in the top position, and I'm going to rename this Contours. There's one more renderer that QGIS has for elevation data, Contours, where we can generate contours for a surface. And contours will connect areas of equal elevation. The default settings are far too large for our data. The contour interval is 100, which would be 100 meters. So I'm going to reduce this down to 1 meter, and I'm going to, for the index contour, make that 5 meters. Index contours are every 5 contour lines, and usually people make those a thicker line so that it's clear where major breaks in elevation are. So now we have contour lines, but they're a little overwhelming at this point. So what we can do is employ a different blending mode on the contours. So we can try, for example, multiply, and that doesn't really have the same effect here as it did before. But there's this series here works quite well. Overlay. Overlay kind of blends the contours with the colors of the beneath it, so that they blend into the map a little bit more, and they're still there, but they don't dominate the map. So I think this works quite well. You can also try soft light, which makes them even a little bit more faint. I encourage you to experiment with these and see what they look like. Some of these, this kind of makes the contour lines white. Addition, that can also be nice. Some of these are going to be very similar to one another. Screen makes them almost disappear. That can also be okay because they're still there, but they're barely visible. And lighten makes them disappear completely. So I really like soft light for these in this case. And so now we have a really nice rendering of this ring fort in just a few minutes using a combination of 3 copies of the layer. One using the contour renderer, one using the hillshade renderer, and the third one using the single band pseudo color renderer with a color ramp we just loaded. And so if we like this color ramp here, one thing we can do is save it. We can click on the color ramp and choose Save Color Ramp. And I'm going to put it into my default symbol library, and I'm going to call this Terrain. And I'm going to tag this as, let's see, Natural. And I'll add it to my favorites. If you add it to your favorites, it'll show up on the first list of color ramps in this dropdown. So I'm going to click OK. So now, when I click this dropdown, I can see that terrain color ramp right there, and I could just reuse it again. So I have another elevation data set you can explore. Castell is right here in north end of Copenhagen. So we can zoom to this layer, and you can explore symbolizing the data for this area as well to see what this looks like when you use these same techniques. Both of these are included in the data. And this data is a lot of fun to work with and creates beautiful maps combined with other vector data. This is the last video, and I hope you enjoyed all this and enjoy working through these symbology exercises.